Hello everyone and welcome to the best game of day one of the Magnus Invitational, or rather the one I myself enjoyed most, so I hope you guys will enjoy that one as well. It's a really crazy game and Alireza lost the game 2, so this is game 3 and he needs a win to get back into the match. So let's see how he will do it, or maybe not. But Ding with the white pieces opens with knight to f3, and I didn't mention in the previous video, but yes, since all of you are congratulating me, the channel has reached 600,000 subscribers, so there you have it. Thank you all, really means the world to me. And regarding will we have some sort of a celebration stream or something, since I can't have any guests over at the moment due to the corona situation, I decided to skip this one and probably do maybe like 750,000 subscribers, and then we're going to really commemorate the milestone, invite some guests, have a nice party stream, and whatever we usually do. But when I finish up the Magnus Invitational, we could throw in a nice Mikhail Tal game, if you guys would enjoy that. But yeah, getting back to the game, knight f3 and d5. Alireza goes for my favorite reply against the Reti, so let's see how he deals with it. We have g3 and now knight to d7. Obviously better than preparing e5 with knight to c6, so he goes knight to d7 preparing e5. And now some players actually allow black to play e5, but as I understand it, this is just wrong. So Ding prevents it, of course. d4, we have knight to b6 and now bishop to g2. Alireza goes bishop to f5 and now just castles by Ding. We have e6 now that the bishop is out of its cage, and knight b to d2 and c6 now, closing up the cage completely. And here there is one game where knight to h4 was played, going after the bishop right away, but here Ding plays c4, and it is as of move 7 already that we have a completely new game, which is not a bad deal if you consider they went into the Reti opening. So D captures on c4, and now just e4, grabbing more space in the center, bishop to g6 and the queen to e2 now, putting pressure on the c4 pawn. However, Alireza defends it with a tactic, knight f6. So now if you go after this pawn, you are going to lose this pawn. And also just a nice developing move. So rook to d1, and now bishop to b4. You have to develop the bishop to a square. d6 doesn't really make sense since e5 wins a piece. Bishop to e7 might be a bit slow, so he decides for bishop to b4. And okay, knight to e5 by Ding, now offering the d4 pawn, and grabbing the d4 pawn would be very unfortunate for black since you run into a lot of nasty discoveries after knight d captures on c4. Opening up a discovery here, the knights now defend each other, so once the queen moves, you get knight to d6 check, and so on. Now you can just gobble up whatever you want. You can capture the bishop, you can capture on b7, and black no longer has castling privileges. So after knight to e5, we have c3 by Firouzja, attacking the knight. B captures, bishop captures, and rook to b1. And only now does he castle to safety. We have knight to b3 by Ding, and for the moment Firouzja is up a pawn, but Ding has a lot of pieces developed, so he's not really worried about it, and he has a very strong central control. We have queen to e7, and now bishop to g5, just not allowing this knight to move, and now queen to a3. It is a very active square for the queen, unless it's a too active square for the queen. So Ding goes for rook to d3, puts pressure on the bishop, and it doesn't really help you if you move the bishop. For example, if bishop b4, knight to c5 really brings a lot of problems over for black, because your queen is under attack. Other than queen a5, you don't have any squares. Now knight captures on b7, again attacks the queen, and here you can just well, trade this, so white wins back his pawn and now regains a much better position. This is now weak, this will be weak. You can just go rook c3, pile up on the pawn here, the bishop on the beautiful diagonal. It's just a much better position for white. So after rook to d3, Alireza defends it with knight to a4. And now Ding pushes h4. Although there was just an instant tactic with knight captures, h captures, and queen c2, threatening to win the bishop. Well, 2 pieces for the rook. And again, if the bishop moves now, bishop b1 just wins. So black wouldn't really have any other options other than allow white to win the 2 pieces for the rook. But Ding says there's no rush. He pushes h4 first, and now Alireza pushes c5. And here, really a complicated position. Anything can be played here, but there is one move and one combination which is above all, and it is the one that Ding played. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning move for Ding here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, as it is not an easy tactic to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's possible to go for knight to c4 first, and there is even a line with knight captures on z5. But the most straightforward one, and the one I hope you found, is bishop captures on f6. You grab the knight here, and after g captures, now just knight to c4, and now the queen has nowhere to go. Well, okay, queen has b4, but now also the move you had to see, knight b to d2, opening up a discovery, and now the queen has no more squares. So Alireza's queen is trapped, but he doesn't give up. Of course, he continues the game with bishop captures on d2. He gives up the queen, rook captures, and bishop captures rook. So a knight and the rook for a queen, not a bad deal. And the Ding now continues pushing with h5, hence the inclusion of h4. The bishop is now trapped, but now Alireza finds the very interesting b5, and he played it pretty much instantly, which poses a lot of problems. For example, if you move the knight, you allow c4, and then the passed pawn just starts marching forward. So here, Ding decides that, okay, he doesn't mind trading pieces, and he's going to open up the black king's position. So h captures on g6, we have b captures on c4, and now g captures on h7 with check. Alireza goes king h8, of course not capturing it, allowing queen h5 with check. And now rook to f3, getting the rook out of harm's way. And now c3. Alireza now has a passed pawn, and it is a very strong passed pawn. And now Ding decides to go for a3. It seems like a reasonable tactic, however, Alireza finds a beautiful way to refute it. a3. And now, of course, if you capture, then the queen here will just win either of the pieces. So Alireza plays c captures on d4 instead. He gives up yet more material to have 2 connected passed pawns in the center of the board. So a captures on b4, and now rook a to c8. Now just putting a rook behind a passed pawn. Once you put this rook behind the other passed pawn, those 2 pawns will be extremely fast. So queen to c2, blocking, and now knight to b2, guarding the d3 square, preparing pawn to d3, and now bishop to f1. Only good move for Ding, you have to cover the d3 square. Rook f to d8, again preparing to push, and now you block it with the bishop. And here, yes, Ding has a queen, but his queen is currently stuck along with the bishop, preventing those passed pawns from marching forward. So e5 by Alireza, and now comes g4 by Ding. He wants to make some room for the rook, and also at some point he wants to play g5 to open up the position. We have king captures on h7. Now there's no reason in allowing Ding to have a passed pawn on h7 any longer. And now king to f1. We have knight captures on d3, rook captures on d3, rook captures on d3, and now rook to c4, going after the b pawn as well, and that would create another passed pawn for Alireza. And here, Ding played queen to c1, but there's also a very interesting idea that is g5 here. I'm not going to ask you to find it, as it's not all that clear, but basically what it asks you to do is free this diagonal for the queen. So next, whatever is played, you're just going to play queen e2, bring the queen over to h5, rook to h3, and checkmate the black king. And if black, of course, does not react to it, if something like rook to c6 to defend the pawn, then rook h3, check, king g6, and now queen d1 with the same idea. Or queen e2, it doesn't really matter, will be winning for white. But Ding went for queen to c1 instead, probably preparing g5, but now king to g7. And now when the king leaves the h file, the king is much safer. We have g5 by Ding, but now f5 by Alireza. And here, E captures on f5, of course, is possible, but Ding decides to go for g6 instead. And here, it's just extremely complicated, and with both players being very low on time, it's impossible to calculate everything. F captures on e4 was played, and now Ding for some reason doesn't move the rook. If you move the rook, yes, these passed pawns look scary, but at least you save your rook, and it is the way to go. However bleak, I mean, you have to play it. Then e3, preventing the queen from entering the game, and then again, anything can happen. Those passed pawns are really scary. However, Ding played g captures on f7 with the idea that he can deliver check and grab this rook, but Alireza just happily captures on d3, and now those pawns are incredibly scary. So queen g5 check, king captures on f7, but now the problem is if Ding captures the rook, then d2 is coming, king e2, c2 is coming, and Alireza will either bring another queen into the game, or Ding will have to somehow achieve a draw, or just queen d5 check, and maybe you try to pick up the rook, but still, it will not be possible. For example, if queen d5 check, you can move the king f8, and now, of course, you cannot capture the rook because this comes with check, so you would have to just continue checking the king and hope you can get a draw by perpetual checks. So after king captures on f7, Ding continued with queen f5 check, king to e7, and queen captures on e5 with check. King to f7, and here we just have queen f5 check, king e7, queen e5 check, and king to f7, and it was in this position that the players agreed to a draw, or it is a draw by threefold repetition, because if Firouzja continues with something like king d7, then you can actually go for this check, and after king e7 you can actually capture this d2, and now the problem is king e2, d3, with check doesn't really work. You will not have any way to continue. King d1, now c2 check, you can just pick up the pawn here, and the king and queen protect against all the pawns. So Alireza saw that there's no way to do this. King to f7 was played, and like I said, the game ended in a draw. But incredibly crazy tactical game. Ding didn't want to spend too much time to work out all of the intricacies of the position, and it was just enough to give the slippery Alireza a chance to escape this game with a draw. Or maybe it was Ding who escaped this game, even though the engine, I mean, says white is completely winning. When you're faced with those so many passed pawns, you know, and the clock is ticking, it's not easy to find the correct moves. So brilliant game by both of them. Ding outplaying Alireza completely in the opening, but then Alireza showed Ding that he is the master of tactics. But yeah. Second game went to Ding. Third game ends in a draw, and the fourth game also ended in a draw. So by winning game 2, Ding wins the match against Alireza, and he is now leading the Magnus Invitational because he receives more points for winning the match right away than Magnus did by beating Hikaru Nakamura in the Armageddon. So for the moment, Ding leading, but we have another set of players today. Of course, the Magnus Invitational continues. So I really enjoyed this game. I do hope you agree that it is the best game of day one, so feel free to comment on that as well. I would like to thank Enric James Barbatos, Balaji Palanyapan, Paul Needham, Prakarmaini, and Shawshank Ram for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Magnus Invitational until it ends. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Sunday.